Freedom Council is nothing without all of you. How do we go about getting people held criminally responsible for their acts? The military is still at risk. Election interference, the medicalization of childhood. These drug dealers like Pfizer and Moderna, we can seize their property. We develop our litigation through conferences like this. It's going to come through communications. It's going to come through conversations. And Freedom Council is that conversation.
For information, visit freedomcouncil.org.
I knew as early as February 2020 that I needed to do something.
I recognized that there was a systematic problem and that this was not about hydroxychloroquine, it was something larger.
Fear shut the world down, and people made a lot of money at it as they were killing us.
I was asked to speak at a freedom rally that was set up to discredit my reputation.
Whoever orchestrated this must not have the safety of this nation in mind.
Medicine and politics should be separated. These doctors were handcuffed.
The American public has awakened. We have a new civil rights movement to restore our rights, and we're going to hold them accountable.
It is a natural progression of a man of God or woman of character to see injustice, to seek it out, and then to act upon it.
Do you hear me? We will never lock down again. This is the hill we die on.
Don't miss New American Heroes with attorney Warner Mendenhall and John Davidson, Mondays on BrokenTruth.tv.
You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage.
And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game's won.
With Broken Truth, Freedom Council's weekly episode is a little hour late this week, but we're here. Warner is out. He is healthy and happy, and he's so healthy he had to make an appointment today, so he couldn't be here with us. Today we have a wonderful person whose husband I've already interviewed once, and I gushed when I was in that interview with him because, I don't know, he's kind of a hero. But welcome the wife of Surgeon General of Florida, Joseph Ladapo. Welcome, Brianna.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you know, I almost hate to like introduce you as his wife because you have so much work that you do that it's almost, but I have to for, I don't know, journalistic legal reasons to at least reference it. But Brianna, you went to Harvard. You have a degree in English, correct?
I do.
And you've gone through this journey with your husband that I covered a little bit in the movie Epidemic of Fraud, which was about hydroxychloroquine. And I remember seeing him in front of the Supreme Court. And he was just speaking so calmly and rationally about, shouldn't we just investigate this medication and other medications? And I have no doubt, because we were both in California at the time, that you probably experienced some aftershocks from that. Would that be safe to say?
Indeed. In fact, that very speech that went viral on the Capitol steps that day was really my first introduction into the world that we now find ourselves in. Up until that moment, we had happily existed in relative anonymity, certainly had no designs on politics, public office, none of it. Yeah. But when COVID broke out and the lockdowns began, we were both in academia and had been for a while. And so a good portion of our community was too. Most of our friends were academics. We'd both taught and gone to school forever. And so I think we both expected more from the people that we had lived and worked and been friends with for so long. But it seemed like 99% of the people we knew just fell over and started following that narrative. And when we started to ask, forgive me, but what I considered to be relatively obvious questions about a narrative that did not make sense, we got incredible amounts of pushback. And I thought, well, maybe it's just LA. Maybe it's just where we are right now. But when he ended up speaking at the Capitol, which was accidental, by the way, that wasn't even planned. He was there for a friend, for Simone Gold. And it just unfolded that way. but I knew he was there. I didn't know what he was doing or what was happening, but I woke up this morning to about 500 phone calls,
Oh no.
emails, and messages, and I thought, "Oh my God, is everybody okay?" And I saw that this had gone viral. And when I first watched it, I didn't understand because it was so measured and so reasonable and to me pretty obvious, right? These are the
Yeah.
questions we should all be asking. And that's really the moment when I got it. Like this, I really understood what we were dealing with. And we've essentially been ostracized from that moment on.
You know, I remember watching that and then immediately it got censored. And the censorship is what really keyed me into the bigger issue that okay, there may be some validity to this if they're desperate to make sure that it's not heard.
Absolutely.
And you know, similar experiences in my circles in California. It and I guess we could even talk about this a little bit because it seemed like people were so anti-Trump that their emotions for that made them hate anything that he supported or was associated with. If he said the sky was blue, they would fight you and tell you how it was not blue, that it was green. Even I mean, even when the science and evidence and everything else was there, it was just like a and I still see it today. And I made the movie thinking that, okay, well, look, if I can provide everybody with all of this information, all of these resources, this huge bibliography, so anything I said was grounded in science and history, I thought it would reach, but it didn't.
Yeah, I had the same reaction to all of our academic friends. I thought, okay, even if you don't necessarily agree with or believe everything that's being laid out for you, it is your job to be in curiosity. Where is your exploration? And I think the greatest thing that I learned from COVID, and it took a couple of years for me to really figure it out, but I did start reflecting on why was this campaign successful? Why do you have these otherwise brilliant individuals just falling hook, line, and sinker for this completely implausible, easily disprovable narrative? And I finally realized after talking to so many people and watching the behavior of people I know very well, it's trauma. Trauma has made people vulnerable to manipulation. And I think one of the reasons that Joe and I had a different take on the pandemic than many is because we both, he's talked openly about this, so he wouldn't mind my sharing, but we both had deeply traumatic childhoods and had done a lot of trauma work prior to that happening. So I don't believe we were as susceptible to this narrative that relied heavily on fear tactics as a lot of other people.
Now, that's an interesting point. I mean, we were as a nation terrified, and fear is the mind killer, as they say. And was it Dune? And very much so that happened to be the case here. And it's strange how some people interpreted that fear and wanted to crush anyone that resisted the vaccines or supported Trump's policies or anything like that. But you know, when I got afraid, you know, I tried to help doctors and nurses and whatnot, and I started experiencing just really strange things where the medicine was politicized, and I didn't understand. I couldn't believe that doctors would do that, and I guess I was just naive. And I also couldn't believe that in a time of national urgency, that people would actively continue to play political roles, even knowing that it could theoretically result in many, many people dying from those errant policies. So, you know, that we could go on for hours about this, but I really want to talk about you and your work. So speaking of, you know, trauma and childhood, you do a lot of work with trafficked children and helping children heal from being trafficked. Is that correct?
I do.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, briefly, I want to share a little bit about my story because it's the reason I do what I do.
Okay.
So I grew up in a deeply religious family. One side was fundamentalist Roman Catholic, and the other side was fundamentalist Protestant, to the extent that they quite literally believed their singular congregation in Orange County, California, was going to heaven, and the rest of Earth was going to hell.
Mm.
So I was born into a sort of religious war within my own family, my own
Wow.
household. And I was a weird kid. I was the kind of kid who was talking to angels and really very deeply, deeply spiritual, but not necessarily religious. And this was a big bone of contention for my family, who told me that I was of the devil and demonic.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a long story too. But the short version is, for a while, that sent me down a very dark path, and I stopped listening to my intuition and trusting that voice of God that I believe resides within each of us. And I got myself into some really bad situations. I shouldn't be alive. But long story short, when I met my wonderful husband, who, by the way, I'm happy to be introduced as his wife. He's a remarkable man, and I am so proud of him. So that is not an issue for me at all. But as anyone who has ever been in an intimate relationship knows, your partner and or your children are arguably the best possible mirrors for any unhealed trauma you might have, right? They reflect back to you anything you have not healed yet. So early in our relationship, as crazy about each other as we were, we really started to break down because both of us were coming into the relationship with an unbelievable amount of unhealed trauma. So that led both of us on a very long spiritual journey where we both did a lot of healing and got a lot of tools. And prior to that experience, if I encountered someone, especially a child, because kids are my Achilles heel, I love them so much. If I encountered a child with a lot of trauma, it would break me. I might, after having the interaction, I would take on so much of their suffering that I'd be sick for weeks. And it was very hard for me to really be effective in any way because I felt everything. It wasn't until I really got a lot of my own trauma handled and out of the way that I could actually use those experiences to be of service and not a mess, not make things worse. And so I wanted to move into helping kids who'd been through some similar things, because now I finally feel like, though I have full recollection of everything that happened and all the lessons that are intact from that experience, I no longer have the emotional charge that makes me, frankly, a liability to other people.
Sure.
So that's why I do what I do. So I do my best to use what I went through to help these kids and give them hopefully a way back, a way back to get in touch with themselves, to re-enter society, to feel safe again, and to really move into who they are and be the gift that they came to Earth to be.
So when you do this work, how does that operate? I mean, you're in Florida now, which, by the way, I'm sure getting out of Los Angeles and going to Florida was probably I just left Laguna, so I get it.
Welcome.
Welcome to sanity. It's a strange feeling when you go out. I don't know if you experience this, but well, you probably do. You go out and people start asking you questions, and you're just like, I'm like, I don't know if you really want me to answer that. Are you sure? Because I was happy just to play nice over here and keep my mouth shut. But once you start getting approached by people in the public in a different environment where it's not so, focused rage on anything that doesn't go along with the narrative trademark, it's a breath of fresh air for them and for you, right?
Absolutely. It's nice to be in a place where people actually are in curiosity, want to get into conversations with other people, are interested in different perspectives. Because to me, if you encounter something that really bothers you or triggers you or makes you uncomfortable, the reasonable response is to ask why.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why do I feel this way? What does this person maybe see that I don't? What experience have they had that changed their perspective? And I feel like, unfortunately, and this is one of the reasons we took our kids out of school, These new generations are being taught that if something makes them uncomfortable, it's okay to shut down, name call, and or run away and avoid it altogether.
Yeah.
And that's created this very tribalistic society where nothing gets solved because nobody can have the tough conversations. It's certainly not with any kind of grace or mutual respect.
Right.
So yeah, Florida's a pleasure.
It's not perfect. We've done some advocacy work down there, and there's definitely room to improve. It's a huge state. But I'm sure, based on the experiences that I've had, yeah, it is the average man is more like, or woman is more likely to be responsive and inquisitive. And maybe to that point of trauma that you brought up, gaslighting causes trauma. And I think as a nation, we've been gaslit, and people are angry on both sides, and they're not really sure who they're angry at. Sometimes I think of Trump as a matador's cape, right? The bull is the people, and they only see the cape, and they get angry and they run at it. But it's really the matador that they need to be concerned about, because he's the one with the knives. And so people have been lied to consistently, and it causes a lot of negative side effects. But in terms of dealing with children, I mean, are you still pretty active, I guess, in Florida with this?
Relatively, yes. I used to be more so, and then I started devoting a lot more hours to my clinic. So I see all ages. But yeah, I do. And I just love working with kids. Honestly, being around children is a joy. And to me, they are the closest, purest reflection of God's love. And it is our collective responsibility to take care of them. And we live in a society that preys on children. And unfortunately, that's been true for a long time. But I think for generations, people have largely been in denial about that.
Yeah.
And that's a very tough reality that is just now coming to the surface. And thank God, because it needs to come to the light so that we can deal with it. But I think a lot of people really don't realize how much our system is predatory toward kids.
Yeah. And what do you mean by that?
Well, boy, that's another thing I could go on for hours about. But concisely, we have all of our institutions, our organizations that are supposed to protect us, right? Like education, medicine, law. We are asked to give our belief and our trust. But the moment we give it, those same organizations come for our kids. And whether it's starting educational indoctrination at a very young age, whether it is taking away the parent and or family's right to informed consent in a hospital, whether since I did grow up in LA, I had a lot of friends and family, and you probably do too, where I'm going with this, in the industry, right?
Oh, yeah.
Everything, Hollywood, music, sports, they are unbelievably predatory. And I'm sorry to say that pedophilia is rampant, and they barely hide it. It's simply the way it is.
Yeah.
And too many people are in denial and or turn a blind eye, because of course there are always the perpetrators, right? Which is a different class of citizen. But then I feel like 95% of those involved are the ones who know about it and are not necessarily participating, but they are allowing it, which is just as bad.
Well, I think the Epstein files right now are showing that there was a huge network of people that were at least aware on some level. They just didn't want to get involved.
Yeah.
Because there was a huge financial benefit to keeping themselves ignorant of it. I do feel like I need to say, in my time in Hollywood, which was about 20 years, and it wasn't a huge deal or anything, but I did get to work on some pretty cool projects. I did not see anything like that. I didn't, people talked about, when people started going, oh, adrenochrome and all this, I was like, what is that? What are you talking about? We were just doing our jobs, and the people that I worked with were all pretty decent people. I mean, they were definitely caught up in the TDS thing. I never really talked about politics. That just seemed like a bad idea. But, you do hear about Corey Haim and Corey Feldman and what they talk about. And they definitely would have been involved at the ground level in a lot of this. And you look at what happens to some of the Disney stars when they get out of that environment, and it definitely sort of speaks to that traumatic childhood than acting out when they get into early adulthood. And I don't know. I think Hollywood is definitely having to go through some introspection because of, well, nobody wants to watch their stuff anymore. Not like they used to. It's not a conversational topic like it used to be, the latest movie and whatnot. So there is progress, and like you said, I mean, this existed for a very long time, and a lot of people are very depressed. Would that be the right word to say? Because of what they're learning, and they think the world is going to hell, but it's not new. It's just new to them.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the
Yeah.
more we expose it and talk about it, the more hopefully it does turn that light onto it.
I completely agree with you. It's like so many other things. That's certainly not the only issue. These things have to come to the surface because they've only been able to exist for so long because they were shrouded in darkness. Once people know and realize, then we can make changes. We can create something new, something that really works for everyone. So I know the world looks disastrous right now, but I believe these are growing pains. This is a necessary phase in moving toward creating the world that we want. And I believe that's our job.
Right. I won't go into too much detail, but I did recently work on a DCF case in Florida, and that kind of tied me into a lot of the Facebook groups where parents who are struggling to get their children back from Family Children Services, not just in Florida, but nationwide, their stories are just heartbreaking. And obviously, many issues that happen in that realm are legitimate and do children, not all parents are great, let's be honest, but the system seems to be overly eager to remove children from their parents based on subjectivity versus, actual evidence. And they've incentivized it with Title IV-E payments to CPS all over the country. So if they take a child from the home, then suddenly now they get all this money. So the idea of making this world the one we want, one of the ideas that we're working on right now is to craft a bill to save America's children, which would incorporate better protections for families. And my thought is one of the most important things we can do is 50% of that Title IV-E money goes to a fund to pay for legal counsel for the parents, because that seems to be one of the issues where it's most needed, because parents are overwhelmed, they're outgunned. The system is designed to take the children and not necessarily return them to their family. So I commend you on your work, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that offline while we're still, formulating it. But so what else are you working on?
Well, I'm writing a lot. After my first book, I was working on my second, and then I was moved to start a Substack instead because with the rate at which things are happening and disclosure and things are moving so fast, I felt moved just to get it out there. I'm more interested in hopefully contributing to the conversation rather than sitting on it. And then I really, really love my work at the clinic. It's a very special place. It's the kind of place that people often come to when they've been utterly failed by Western medicine.
Okay.
So we are actively working on a lot of really interesting things and trials and research, but we get a lot of people who, thanks to the incredibly toxic world we live in, right? The air, the water, the food, everything is toxic. And thanks to generations at this point of genetic manipulation and people not responding well to the introduction of these toxins, we have a lot of chronic illness out there. It seems like almost everybody has mold, Lyme, Epstein-Barr, EMF sensitivity. I could go on and on and on. So we're doing everything we can to really give people a holistic, comprehensive, really effective approach to get their health back. And that makes me happy. That gets me out of bed.
Now, that's funny. In my interview with Joe, he did mention that, Dr. Ladapo, he did mention that you had dealt with a mold issue, right?
3, in fact.
Oh my gosh.
This is the only thing about Florida I do not love. We had never lived anywhere where mold was an issue before, so we just didn't know. And it took us a little over a year to figure it out the first time. Because, of course, the landlord was saying, oh, no, you don't have mold. You're fine. You're fine. Meanwhile, we're
Right.
being hospitalized. And then after we moved, and then we had the big storms. We got wiped out in the hurricanes, and that created some new mold issues. So we've now been on this journey for a long time, over 3 years. But I have to tell you, as unpleasant as it has been and as maddening at times, almost everything that I have learned has ended up being useful to somebody else,
Yeah.
which makes it worth it. So I have learned so much about the fundamentals of health and really how to go after root cause issues and what those root causes are. And the crazy thing is, even though I see thousands of people, most of the time, it's the same 5 or 6 root causes for everybody these days. So it's really gratifying to be able to help somebody figure out this puzzle they've been grappling with, sometimes for 10 or 20 years.
Wow. You guys are doing a lot of impressive work in Florida. What would you say are some of the biggest moves, and not necessarily what your husband's been involved in, but just in general? I mean, there's a reduction of mandates for many of the shots now, if I understand. What are you most happy about?
Oh, goodness. That's such a funny question because there are so many things that I'm delighted we've done, but usually all I can think about is what we still need to do. So I have this laundry list in my head of things we need to accomplish. But I'm very proud of him for having the courage to stand up and say that mandates are essentially a form of enslavement, and they are immoral, and they are absolutely wrong. And we're in a frustrating situation right now because, he can do only what he can do at the state level in the Department of Health, and he's done that. But a lot of the mandate issues fall with the legislature, who, oh goodness, forgive me, but we've had one heck of a legislative session this year. It has been maddening, and kind of like what you were saying about Trump being this litmus test or this divining rod for people. DeSantis has the same effect on many people, particularly the legislators. So we're in the situation now where if DeSantis says this is a priority for us, the legislators are deliberately being obstructionist. And that's particularly frustrating when you're talking about things that are for the people, like health freedom, like the right not to vaccinate your children, if you don't want to. Informed consent. To me, these are not partisan issues, never should have been. These are humanitarian issues. And if you are so egotistical that you allow that to drive your decision when you are hired by and supposed to be working for the people, you don't belong in that position anymore.
I was shocked when the legislature in Florida was trying to push through a law that made it illegal to criticize Roundup.
That was my favorite. Yes.
I mean, read the room, guys.
I couldn't even believe that was on. We're talking about freedom of speech in this era. My goodness. Although when I really had to sit with that one, and I did a lot of boxing because I was very angry about that.
Yeah.
But I realized that that is such a level of insanity, right? And you see that similar insanity in other places right now. There's actually quite a bit of that where like my jaw would drop. But I am interpreting that as, we'll call them the bad guys, being so very desperate and losing control of the narrative that they're just throwing everything at the wall to see what they can make stick. I think the wheels have really come off the cart at this point.
Right.
So in that way, it's a good thing. But yeah, I can't believe we're talking about freedom of speech and constitutional issues in this year.
Especially in a place like Florida, the DCF cases, when people are told about them, they're shocked because like, this is Florida. This is as red as it gets. And it's like, well, it's not a right or left issue. It's really more of a good and evil kind of thing. And it doesn't mean that the people that push these things are necessarily evil, but maybe they've been sort of hoodwinked into thinking that an industry has more rights than people.
Yes. And I think Though we are clearly entering a new paradigm as a human race, which is wonderful, a lot of our systems are still operating in the old paradigm, and politics is certainly one of those. So we have a lot of legislators who are still more concerned about their reelection and their campaign funding than what is actually right for the people. It's almost as if they forget they are the people. I often
Yeah.
wonder, like, don't these people have kids, spouses, people that they care about, because they are perpetuating things that are actively harming humans? But we're getting to the point where people are not so easily snowed as they used to be. Their
Yeah.
memories are not quite as short as they used to be. And they are looking to hold people accountable because they are tired of being lied to.
Yeah. I think the rise of Substacks and alternative media, Twitter to an extent, even Facebook now is kind of releasing some of its control over the narrative. Those alternative sources of information are giving people a better perspective. And it does seem like traditional mainstream media is mostly being pushed to the side, which is maybe a good thing. For a very long time, I mean, yeah, I worked at CNN back in the 90s. I would have thought this was preposterous when I was there. Now, there were things that weren't covered that maybe should have been covered, and maybe things that were overly elevated that maybe weren't as urgent, but I didn't see what I started seeing. I don't know, it's around 2010, I think. It got so bad that it was impossible to even watch television anymore. And so I went into a black hole where I just deactivated. I had blocks. No one that tweeted about Trump would show up in my feed. I had words that just no Obama, nothing. So it was keep the politics away, which I guess is why I was kind of blindsided in 2020 when I started speaking out, because I realized, whoa, this has been festering like a wound that's infected for a decade, and it finally attacked the host in a near terminal way. But I don't know, maybe COVID was a catalyst to this awakening. It definitely was. So sometimes darkness can show you the light, kind of thing. And we definitely went through a period of darkness, and it's heartening to see families like yours out there, public, educated, and advocating for really good change. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you too. You guys are
So,
doing the same.
so some of the you mentioned some trials and things like that are going on at your clinic. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I can't yet, just
Okay.
because things are actively happening,
Okay.
but I can say that, and this will probably surprise absolutely no one, but there are all these mechanisms or supplements or different things that have been around forever that have been actively blacklisted by
Yeah.
the powers that be. And there are so many wonderful things going on with us being able to use things like that. And I can say some of these things are glutathione, melatonin. We've been sold this bill of goods that melatonin is a sleep hormone. In fact, I think it's in the UK where you can only access 1 milligram by prescription.
Really?
Yes, which is insanity because there are so many white papers out there. If you look up any kind of cancer and melatonin in a good research database, you will find so many articles, and therapeutic doses are usually 3 to 500 milligrams a couple times a day.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so I can't give specifics, but I just want people to know there are so many wonderful things available that are safe, that are cheap, and that are easily accessible to handle this burden that I think has fallen upon us health-wise from all the garbage in our environment that we are breathing, eating, sleeping, and drinking.
Yeah. Speaking of garbage in the environment, doesn't Florida have a law against chemtrails now?
What can we do for all the good that has done? So this is another frustrating issue that we are tackling. Yeah, so at the state level, we've done everything we can at the state level. Unfortunately, it's not coming from the state.
Hmm.
I can't make any big assertions about where it is coming from. All I can say is that it appears to be federal, and we have absolutely no control over that. So we have a task force in Florida now working actively on this. We have some amazing people who have been really getting after this for a long time. And so we are going to see what we can do at a state level where we do have control, because that one has just been a headache and a half.
You know, I've spoke to a Navy pilot, and I think he was a Navy pilot, and he's like, "Oh, it's just water vapor." I was like,
Try
but
again.
if the goal is to restrict visibility of sunshine onto the planet, right, to filter it like sunglasses almost, it's not necessarily a pure evil chemical that is doing the thing. You could just affect it with enough of the water vapor to filter out some of the light. And I don't think it's necessarily water vapor. I mean, I think they've all definitely tested that already and said, it's a little bit more than that. And there are already companies that are out there. So I don't even understand why we have to have a discussion about whether or not it's even a valid conversation. But, yeah, we deal with this everywhere we are. It's not specific to one region. There's pollution in the air, in the water, and in our food supply. Like, that's really bad. Like, why are we doing this? So I will say that we do have an upcoming event on May 22nd, 23rd in Myrtle Beach to talk about solutions to some of these issues. I'll have a little bit more information about that, but it's going to be our Thrive 26. Finding better paths forward is crucial if we're going to make a better future for our children. And that's part of what I try to do with this platform, is just to give people like you more of a voice, and your husband, and so many others. I noticed he tweeted this morning that there's no electronic medical record code specifically for mRNA vaccine injuries. Now,
that he had tweeted that, but I'm not surprised.
And which is shocking, because we know that it exists. I mean, at this point, it's not a debatable question whether or not vaccine injuries exist. The question is, how prevalent are they? But if there's no mechanism to, tag and mark and let people identify them within the medical system, it's going to continue to have this huge blind spot.
Oh, yeah. And by design, I think, because the answer to that question would destroy the pharmaceutical industry, because it's much more prevalent than I think most people are aware.
Right. And the pharmaceutical industry then ties into the FDA and the NIH and HHS, and, big systems of funding are just difficult to overcome. But we are making some progress.
We absolutely are. Toby Rogers wrote a beautiful article. You've probably seen it, about epistemic capture.
Mm-hmm. I know Toby, yeah.
Oh, okay, such a sweetheart and just a brilliant man. But I really loved the way he laid out how early it begins, how this industry funds medical education, and then the medical professors, and then creates the retirement, and then funds the journals and the editorial boards that create the information. And it's from soup to nuts. This is a captured industry. So I think it's really hard for a lot of people to tell what's actually going on unless it touches their lives personally and sends them down the rabbit hole, if you will.
Yeah. So what else can we talk about with you? You mentioned a book?
Oh, yes, I did write a book. Hopefully someday I'll write another. Right now I'm mostly busy homeschooling my babies. But my book is called Emerging from Darkness. I wrote it a couple years ago, and it really wasn't my intention, to be honest with you. But after I went on that journey that we talked about earlier, where I really got clear that in order for me to really be of any service at all to humanity, I had to deal with my own trauma. Because until we deal with our trauma, we're not quite a whole person. We're essentially a set of cultivated responses, defense mechanisms, and negative experiences that then goes out and reacts to the world around them. And it changes every relationship you have, every job, the way you perform, what your fears are, how easily you can be manipulated with certain types of information. And so I really got very serious about cleaning up my own trauma, and so did my husband. We did this together, and uh, forgive me, it sounds histrionic, but it completely changed my life. I finally was able to really be free, to be who I really am, and to do what I really came here to do, without the trappings of all this external yammering and the fear tactics and manipulation. And so I ended up writing the book because I wanted to share with people where I started and essentially what it looked like. Everyone has trauma. Everyone. You know, we have our own experiences. There's intergenerational trauma, the trauma that we inherit from our ancestral line, and all of that is very real. It can change your epigenetics. So this is something we are all carrying. And after I finally had the experience of getting it out of my system, and I really got present to how much space it had been taking up, how much it had been manipulating my personality, like the way I dealt with things, what I was teaching my children. I realized I had to share with people that there is a way out, no matter how bad or how dark or how painful things get. There are solutions. You actually can be free of this.
Well, that's amazing. I just put the link to the book in the chat, so if anybody's looking for it, there you go. You know, I think a lot of that happened with us too in our family. We in 2020 we said, hey, you know, I kind of want to go be more positive. I don't always want to get sucked into this dark pit of despair every time you encounter something so negative that it just shocks you. So that, you know, I like hearing other people come through come through to a positive point. Now, homeschooling is something that we also do. And, you know, I'm a big fan of it. I always kind of wanted to homeschool. I grew up in a school environment, and I was half the height of all the other kids. So when it was time for PE, I was the football. so so it was any option to not put my kids through that, I was eager to embrace. And it just so happened that when we started homeschooling in the fall of 2019, at first everybody's like, "Oh, that's crazy," and then 5 months later, everybody's doing it. But you're sort of an expert in this homeschool field. So can you talk about that a little bit?
That's very sweet of you. I would not call myself an expert. Trial and error has gotten me a long way.
You've survived it. That makes you an expert. And I've met your boys. They're very precocious and smart young men.
Thank you. I'm so proud of my boys. They are such amazing humans. I'm really happy to be their mom. When they were little, so because Joe and I went essentially all the way in academia, both big on education, big believers, at least formally, in the school system, we started our kids in school very young. And it honestly had not occurred to me that at that age I would even need to be worried about indoctrination. And I know now that's really naive, but it took experience for me to figure that out. And I had started to notice little idiosyncratic things that were happening, some of it with the education itself, the academics and the curriculum, like words that shouldn't be there and suggestibility here and there.
Yeah.
But the more alarming thing was what was happening to my boys. So my eldest is the consummate straight A student, eldest child, very mature, very, very sweet, just an easy kid, someone that you would think actually would be able to flourish even in that relatively restrictive classroom environment. But as we put him in school, I started watching his light go out. And this very naturally kind child started responding differently and getting a little bit darker. And I was already becoming concerned. And then COVID happened. And so we, of course, the school shut down. We pulled them out of necessity. And then when the schools reopened, and I'm using air quotes because it was with plexiglass and screens, we thought, absolutely not. I remember the year before when the Academy of Pediatrics had said no screen time for kids under 2, and what was it, an hour or 2 for kids under 6, and all that changed. So we started homeschooling out of necessity. And we actually had a great time. It was our first taste of really spending all of our time together as a family. And honestly, we thought we were prior to COVID. We had breakfast together and dinner together and weekends together. But, with me home with the babies, Eric in school, Joe at the hospital, we actually were not spending that much time together, but we didn't realize it. So when the lockdowns happened, we started having a blast. We found some other families who weren't willing to stop going out, and we had an amazing time. We basically spent every day together. We went hiking, we went to the park, we went to the beach, we celebrated birthdays and holidays together. And my kids still refer to it as the endless summer because that's what we did. We just had a ball. And after that, we really didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
So when we moved to Florida, because it was a much freer environment, and our eldest especially, we didn't know anybody, so they wanted to meet other kids, and I understood that. So we thought, okay, we can try a more typical school experience. So we put them in school, all three of them. And things started to break down fast. Oh my goodness. First of all, they really weren't learning. A lot of school is largely a waste of time. It's a whole lot of waiting around for other people. And then even though we had them in a relatively good school, at least by state standards, and I have to say, the teachers really did care. There was a lovely principal, very educated, very kind, very focused on actually helping the kids, not beating them down.
Yeah.
And so it was about as good of an environment as you could ask for in a school. And still, gotta tell you, the education was atrocious. They brought home homework that was riddled with spelling and grammatical errors. At one point, I corrected a handout and sent it back to the teacher. I don't mean to be unkind, but this is ridiculous. You're supposed to be educating these kids. And we took a tour of this school. And of course, I'm a foodie, so I wanted to see the cafeteria. I wanted to talk about the ingredients. Are there other GMOs? And they made a big point of telling us, oh no, everything is homemade, everything's very healthy, and breakfast and lunch are included for all students. I thought, oh, how lovely, great. And I'm also thinking that means I don't have to pack lunches anymore.
Right.
So we tried it on day one, and I had walked my littlest to class. So my other two went straight off to class, but I walked my baby into pre-K. And sitting there at his desk was a piece of hermetically sealed, seed oil laden GMO banana bread, if you might even call it that, and a thing of pasteurized, sugar-filled chocolate milk. That was breakfast for these babies, and I lost my mind.
Yeah.
You know what? This just isn't going to work. And then there were a couple other incidents. My middle guy, we joke that he is the reincarnation of Evel Knievel. This kid just wants to box and jump off cliffs. He will not sit still. He will not wear pants. So he is not the kind of kid that you're going to get to sit in a classroom chair for several hours and behave. It's just not it's just not an option.
Right.
And then our youngest, who was somehow born with this extremely clear sense of morality and has been walking around lecturing grown-ups on their choices since he was about 16 months old. He once lectured a very large biker on the corner in LA who was smoking. And he walked up with his tiny little finger and wagged it. You should not be doing that. That's a very poor decision. I'm going to have to call your mom.
Wow.
So he's mouthy in a wonderful way. You've met them.
Sure.
And so this did not go over well in the classroom. His teacher called me once and said, well, today is the day that we sat down with each student to tell them what they were doing well and where they could improve. And before I could say a word, your son told me that I have a good attitude most of the time. Sometimes I need to work on it, and that my snacks could be better.
Wow.
Anyway, finally, I just pulled him out. I did not want to allow this system of indoctrination to change who they are and put their lights out. And homeschooling has been one of the best decisions we ever made. We are loving it.
So what kind of curriculum do you use?
Our core curriculum is classical conversations.
Us too.
And then, oh, awesome. I love it. I love the timeline song. Even I wake up singing the timeline song. So does Joe. But on top of that, so we use different curriculums for math. So for our eldest, he is actually a mathematical genius, and he just likes it dry and to the point. So he's a Saxon kid. So we've always used Saxon for him. My little guys are less fond of math and really need it delivered in a more palatable way. They're more creative types. So we use the good and the beautiful for math and language arts, which I love. And then for science, we do about 90% experiments, because I don't know if this is true across the board, but at least for my boys, they learn so much better when they are destroying things or blowing things up or building things. It's got to be hands-on. So we use home science tools, which I absolutely love. And then there's a little bit more here and there, but that's our main day. And then we're learning some Spanish too.
Here's a science experiment that I like to do for the kids. We also have like it's not really a co-op, but there's a group that meets at a church here that does a lot of the CC programs. So they have their social group of about 50 to 100 kids, but that's good. But I like to take more physical, hands-on scientific. So this is my big science experiment that I show with the kids: how sodium metal reacts in the lake behind us, and that's always a big hit. But it's nice that another benefit of COVID was you did have a lot of these homeschool curriculums become much more, robust, I think. Would you say that?
Absolutely, because I think a lot of people thought, "Oh, I'd like to do that, but I can't. How would that work?" And the thought is almost too scary to even give it a try, and it's difficult to break out of a 9 to 5 schedule, or maybe one or both parents are probably working. It's just tough to even try it on. But COVID forced the issue for a lot of people, and actually, I include myself in this statement. I think a lot of parents, once they tried it, thought, "Wow, this isn't nearly as hard as I thought." It's actually amazing because my kids are happier. They're learning easily 10 times more. They are learning how to honor their own body's rhythms and needs. They're learning actual life skills like, cooking and finance and gardening. Because homeschool takes so much less time than essentially sitting around all day at school, they have time to pursue other things. So, mine are out fishing and doing archery and martial arts and all these things that we didn't have time for before. And I think for a lot of families, once they give it a shot, they actually see how much easier and less stressful it is, despite what they thought going in.
Yeah, it's sometimes the kids just don't want to learn, and you definitely have to deal with that. Sometimes I have to encourage my wife a little bit more on it because she gets frustrated with it, because it is it's children.
Yeah.
They do not have the same attention span that adults have. Although I don't know if adults have it that much anymore either. But it has been far and above better than I could have hoped. So to experience it and to meet other families like you, and I think Rachel Rodriguez homeschools her kids. There's a lot of us out there that are pursuing this, and it's not like what it was perceived prior to COVID, which was, oh, you teach them to churn butter and get married at 14. Like that was and then they're going to be socially awkward. Like these kids are very social.
Oh, that's my favorite criticism of homeschool, because so we had been in Florida for a while, trying out the typical school thing before we made the switch. And my kids' biggest complaint, all three of them at their various ages, was that, "Mom, we don't have any real friends." And they would describe to me, they had playmates, but they couldn't have real conversations. And this is not to malign any child, any parent, any family at all.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we have a system that does not encourage critical thinking, does not encourage deep exploration, does not encourage asking questions or pushing back. So you end up, you leave your kids in this institutionalized system long enough, and they become, out of sheer necessity, pleasers, yes men, forgive me, but lemmings in a lot of ways. It's much just out of sheer survival. You almost have to become a follower, or you end up in the principal's office all the time. So my kids were having trouble connecting with people because none of their friends knew how to have real conversations. So the minute we got out of that and joined a homeschool co-op, honestly, it was literally the night we met everyone. It was I can't think of the word, when you show up and meet all the parents for a couple of hours, orientation. Went to orientation. We took the kids. They left with 50 new friends.
Yeah.
It was this instant bond because people largely share a lot of the same values. They love their kids clearly enough to make this sacrifice for them. All the kids were bright and curious. Nobody was on a device. No one was looking at a phone. People could actually look you in the eye. And one of the things that I loved but hadn't anticipated was that kids of all ages were comfortable with other humans of all ages. I had never thought about how strange it is that we essentially corral people
Right.
within your age group. What is that about? That does not teach people to be in the world. So I had 3-year-olds running up to me and giving me hugs and showing me their favorite drawing. No fear, no discomfort around it. It was really beautiful. And while the adults were chatting, all the kids were outside, and it turned into Little House on the Prairie out there. The big kids are pushing little ones on the swings, and the middle kids were helping each other. And it was so beautiful and so natural. And I thought, this is the village model that we walked away from as a society. We had it right then.
I think that maybe that's going to be the most important thing, is that we've created a next generation. If you look at it from God's eye view, right? We've created a new generation of kids that are going to be raised in this environment. Not all of them, unfortunately, but maybe the pressure that society feels from, trying to compete with homeschoolers is going to open up better opportunities from children who, for whatever reason, are not able to be homeschooled. It's great to have these conversations in public so people hear it, because, it is daunting at first. I luckily had a cousin whose child was about 12 years older than my kids, and she homeschooled, and it was a great experience. She graduated high school at 16. She was in college. She finished college by like 19. She got a nursing degree. So, I mean, there's, great examples out there, and now there's going to be even more. Especially with your kids, I have no doubt.
And yours. The future's looking up.
So we've got about a minute left. Anything you'd like to add? This has been a great conversation.
It sure has. It's flown by. Well, I touched on this earlier, but I really, really want to share with people, because I think for a lot of people right now, things are tough out there. Things are scary. It feels for a lot of people like the world is ending. And I really want people to know that what we're seeing, it is an ending, but it's an ending of this dark paradigm that is perpetuated for generations, that has been wildly harmful. It never did work. It was never going to work. And frankly, we need to burn it down and start again. And so what we're seeing is the death of an old paradigm that really was suffocating and enslaving people. We're moving into a paradigm that is all about community, freedom, cooperation, love, light. And so these are just growing pains. I don't want people to feel discouraged or afraid. The best truly is yet to come. We are going to get through this. There's still a lot to learn. There are some systems that need to come down to make way for new systems, but they're being built. Things are coming to light like they never have before. So we are entering, I think, the most beautiful and exciting time there's ever been to be alive. So I want people just to be joyful and keep the faith. It's going to get better.
I could not have said it better myself. Brianna, thank you so much for taking time to be on this interview. Hopefully we'll see you soon. And if there's nothing else, we'll say good night or goodbye, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. You too.
Okay, let me see if I can play our little outgoing promo. Here we go.
I believe in the Constitution. I believe that one case, the right case, can change the world. If you believe this too, Freedom Council is for you. Pursuing a major case can be overwhelming, but we provide a community of practice so that you have the resources available to support your case. My name is Warner Mendenhall, and we are Freedom Council. Join Freedom Council today. freedomcouncil.org.